wanted to give you a quick little video on how to make some fake bacon. It's actually pretty easy. You can use these little foam pieces that you get sometimes when glassware or other breakables are packed and you get something shipped to you. Save these if you like making some fake food, especially things like bacon or different kinds of meats that are thin in texture. Sometimes these are thicker and you can make thicker cuts of meat with them. They actually come out very realistic and they're super simple. What I do is and this one is extra nice because it's already been rippled. It's not necessary. If you want to ripple your bacon even further, you can roll it and press and do some different creases in it. You can use the flat side of a knife or a palette knife, anything like that, just to further texture this and get it a little bit wonky. You can tear this by hand, tearing it in sort of strips going back and forth just to make it, because bacon has those edges that aren't exactly straight. So tearing it in sort of a little wonky pattern is going to be your best bet to get that. So I have some pieces torn here already. The paint color that I'll use for the base of this is an acrylic paint. This is by Master's Touch. You can find that one at Hobby Lobby. This is a burnt sienna. I like the sienna group for a lot of different things regarding food, baked foods, roasted foods. This one has sort of a reddish tone to it, and it's perfect for the undercoating for bacon. And then we'll go over it with a little bit darker shade just to make it have that cooked look. I probably should have put down some parchment before I did this, but I do have a little shop towel here that I can use so that I don't get paint all over the place. So basically all you're going to do is take a slightly damp, I use a flat paintbrush. This one is flat. This one is let's see, it's either a half or a 3/4. It might be a 3/4 inch. Any flat paintbrush will do. All you're going to do is back and forth, try and not to leave too many brush strokes. You'll want to get the paint on fairly thick. You'll want to wet the paint just a little bit to get on there. You can do 2 coats. I usually don't. I'll let the front side dry and then I'll flip it over and do the back side. Like I said, you want to get a fairly thick coat of paint on there as your base, going all the way to the edges, making sure that you coat the sides as well. And then when those are dry, you're going to want to flip that over and coat the back the same way. Just getting a nice coat, making sure that there's not too much of that white showing. Sometimes you can find these foam sheets in darker colors like grays and blacks. Those are pretty good for other cuts of meat that you want to have that really dark base to. But for bacon, just sort of as a rule, the bacon you want to keep a little bit lighter because bacon has that little fat marbling in it. And you definitely want that to show. So that'll be your base coat on there. Then you'll want to take a slightly darker brown. For that, I use a raw umber. This is also a Master's Touch. You can find these in lots of different brands. Doesn't have to be Master's Touch. These are the acrylic paints. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that down. You don't need a whole lot of this because this is just going to give it sort of that cooked appearance. I'm going to switch to a round brush. This is a number 5. It's got a decent point on it. Anything with a little point that's a round brush will be the best for doing this. You want to make sure that you get your brush good and wet. Add a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit of water to your paint. And you'll want to knock off just a little bit of that So before this, I usually flip it back over and do a wetter coat on here just to get it to simulate what the base of bacon would be like. Then you're going to want to sort of very gently go back and forth, concentrate some on the edges because you want to think of what bacon looks like when it's cooked. If you have an extra piece of cooked bacon in your fridge from your weekend morning breakfast, you can pull that out and lay it beside you while you're doing this, just to make sure that you get a decent look at your bacon. That is a basis of it. I think it should be just a little bit darker with the undercoating on here. I think I wiped a lot of it off on the paper towel because I didn't let it dry thoroughly. So before I do the next one, I'm going to go back over it. A little bit of this. I'm going to make this a little bit darker. I'm going to go back over this one as well. And it's okay to paint over what you've already done. If you don't like how it comes out, just stop and fix it. These things are never set in stone. Just going to take a little bit of that darker, and I'm going to concentrate on the edges, doing a little bit in the middle. You can always blend these with the fingers on your glove. Just blend all that paint in nice. And you have a fairly realistic piece of bacon that you can use. You can definitely make these smaller. These are a little bit long as far as bacon goes. You can tear them, make them smaller, make them a little bit more jagged in their shape. Anything to mimic a real piece of bacon is just fine. If you're putting these on fake burgers or maybe on the side of a plate of fake eggs, you're going to want to make these even more realistic if you're going to do it just as a separate piece. If you're putting it on a burger, you don't have to do too much to it because it'll be sort of hidden by the bun. But to make a semi-realistic, that's pretty realistic. I even have some bacon scent that I can put on these to make them ultra realistic. So here's a quick little tutorial on how to make a realistic tomato slice. I have some little seeds in there. I've made it super shiny. Looks like a tomato slice. You can use this for lots of things, like putting on a fake burger. But what we're going to use it for today is topping a traditional hot brown, which is one of the traditional dishes of the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, and one of the main things served at the Kentucky Derby. So, I'm going to show you real quick how to make some realistic fake tomatoes. So, here we go. I'm going to start with some air dry clay. This is a Model Magic clay made by the Crayola Company. You can find these at craft stores and online. You need to knead the clay for between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on what your weather is and how humid it is. The clay is very stiff when you first take it out of the package, and when you try to pull it, it typically snaps like this. You don't want any snapping to occur when you're using this clay, because the end result will be you'll have cracking in the pieces that you make. So you need to make sure that you take the time to pull it and stretch it and knead it and roll it and do all sorts of things to warm it up and really get that stretch going to where you have like a taffy pull going on. Then you know that the clay is actually ready to use. I'm not going to condition this whole thing because it'll take me a long time, so I just pulled off a piece. I'm probably going to make 2 tomatoes because that's what's going to go on the top of our Kentucky hot brown. So I'm just going to roll this on my surface because that'll help condition it out, and then I'll put it all back together, and I'll squeeze it some more, and I'll start to pull. I'm still getting the snapping. I'm going to roll it some more. You just need to make sure that you have plenty of time in your conditioning of your clay, because in the end it'll result you with a much better product and much more realistic, and you won't have those cracks. So this is more like what you want. You want it to be like a taffy pull, where it just keeps on going and going and going with no snap. So now your clay is ready to use. So I'm going to form this piece into a little ball. I'm going to roll it out just a little bit here, and then I'm going to take and cut it in half, because we're going to make 2 tomato slices out of this. Doesn't have to be a lot of clay, about the size of a ping pong ball. Tomatoes are all different sizes, so you can make them larger or smaller depending on what the use is. I'm going to make them about, I guess these are about 2 inches around, but like I said, you can make them as large or small as you need to. So I'm going to press down the clay just a little bit. You need them to be thick, like tomato slices are fairly thick when you slice them. They do have typically a straighter, flatter edge on them when you cut the tomato. So you want to go around and press your disc down on a non-stick surface. I'm using a tile here. I get these at the home improvement stores. So you want to make sure that your disc has some flatter edges like this, more like you've sliced off a piece of tomato. I'm going to do the same with the other. I'm just going around and pressing and spinning the circle around and pressing the sides down until I have the shape that I'm happy with tomato-wise. Just want it to look as realistic as possible. Now, I'll probably have to do that one more time. See, this one came out a little bit round on a couple of the edges. It's okay, because sometimes when you're cutting a tomato, it'll smush a little bit. But you want to try and keep as straight an edge as you can, just for that realism. This is a needle tool. It's just a straight, sort of looks like the end of a nail coming up out of this little piece here. It's called a needle tool. Used for clay. You can get these at any craft store or online. I'm going to start by scratching out this midsection. You want to make these roundish chambers here, because this is typically where your tomato pulp is. It's a little lighter in color, and that's where your seeds are. So I'm going to go around in sort of like a heart shape. I scratch that in, sort of like an upside down, almost like an upside down apple. I'll say that. Maybe that's what it looks like to you. I'm not sure. Then I'm going to scratch right up the center. So now it kind of looks like a pair of lungs or a peace sign. And then I'm going to take this needle tool and I'm going to start pressing. I'm going to make these indentations where I can put some of this glossy material to make it look like the juicy pulp center of the tomato. And I'm going to press down quite a bit to make these chambers, trying not to disturb the nice flat outside part that we just made. And at the bottom, I'm going to make a larger little opening. So that's kind of what I did. It really looks like, sort of like a peace emblem now. But that chamber on the bottom, I really pressed in. I'm going to do the same to the other. And if you slice a tomato, you can sort of, there's lots of different imprints that you'll see when you slice the tomato. Also, it depends on what kind of tomato you're slicing. So if you want to get a good, realistic picture to follow of the pattern that you want to make in your tomato slice, Go ahead and get a tomato, make a couple of slices, lay them out on a plate in front of you, and then you'll have something to work from, and you'll be able to see the real thing right in front of you. It's also good to match colors, getting that in front of you as well. Now, I will caution you, if you're using any kind of real food or you have real food sitting in your area where you're working with chemicals and clays, make sure that you don't eat it. Discard that food, because if you got anything on it, you don't want to make yourself sick. Because sometimes we work with a lot of chemicals and it gets can get a little dangerous. I'm going to get a little shop towel here to put my tomatoes on. I should be using a piece of parchment paper, but this will do for right now. So, for the tomato color, I have a couple of different paints that I go to. One of them is called Crimson. This is an Artist's Loft paint. It's a little bit of like an orangey red. I typically add a little bit more orange paint into it, or a peach paint into it, depending on the kind of tomato that I'm trying to mimic. So I'm going to put some of this crimson paint right here, and then I'm going to grab some orange, I believe. Let's see if I can find that. This is just a straight up orange. This is again a Master's Touch acrylic. You can find those at Hobby Lobby. I believe it is their brand. If it's not their brand, it's a brand that they carry. Any orange should be fine for this. You can also use, this is another Master's Touch. It's called Light Coral. It's nice for the center of this, so I'm just going to put just a little bit there, just in case I'm going to lighten up the center. So those are the three colors that I'll typically use for this. And I will use a flat brush and a small round brush to do these with. The flat brush I use is small also. I think this is about a 1/2 inch, and the round, any round brush will do. I start with the flat brush. I need to grab a glove, I'll end up full of paint. So I'm going to start with the red. Now I don't mix these paints until they're actually on the item. I'm going to start with the bottom, and I'm going to paint a coat of red right on the bottom. I use a fairly thick coat of paint because I'm covering white. And sometimes you have to paint this twice. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to add just a little bit of that orange and brush it in and blend it. Because the paint is wet, it's very easy to blend and gives you a nice tomato color right off the bat. I'm going to set that down. A little bit of the paint is going to get absorbed by this towel, but not a ton, because I'm not going to touch it for me. I'm going to do the same thing to my other slice. A nice thick coat of the crimson red. Going all the way around the side. And then I'm going to put just a little bit of that orange and blend it right in, making that nice, unique tomato color. And put that one down. I'm going to do the same thing to the top edge, but not in the middle where we carved out those sections. But I am going to go down in that chamber, just dotting that flat brush around the circle, the outer circle of that area. I'm not getting in the inside, just staying on the outside. If you get a little on the inside, it's not a big deal, because you can go over it with the lighter color and blend it in. And I'm going to try to reduce the amount of brush strokes that you see. I'm just very feather-like going over the top. And then I go back and grab some orange, and I'm going to go back over it and lighten it up and make it more of that tomato color. I'm going to go back and do the same thing with the other one, getting down in those chambers, around the outside. I'm picking up a little bit of that orange. Just brightening that up, making it look a little more tomato-like. And feathering to reduce my brush strokes. And I'm going to go in with this round brush, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of this orange and a little bit of the peach, and just start dabbing in the middle where we pressed all that area out. Now when I go around in the crease area, I'm actually automatically picking up some of that red color, and that's fine. You want some of the red in there and some of the lighter peach color. So I'm going to pick up some orange, pick up some peach. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. A little orange, a little peach. Now I'm going to rinse my brush off because I've got a lot of red on there. Dab off the water. I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick up a little peach because I feel like this one is a little bit too dark in this mid section. So I'm just going to pick up just the peach and put it right on the top of these raised areas. Just a little bit more there. And I think that's very good. I like the way that looks. It's very realistic. I'm going to go ahead and wash that brush as well. So now what you're going to do, I'm not going to disturb it because the bottom will dry itself nicely and you're really not going to see the bottom of the tomato. If you're making a two-sided tomato for whatever reason, you'll have to let this one side dry and then do the exact same thing with the other side. I've actually never made a two-sided tomato, and I'm not sure what you might use that for, but in the event that you are, otherwise it'll kind of look like this on the back, which is totally fine because 99% of the time only the top is going to be visible. So I'm going to let those dry just a little bit. After they are dry, I'm going to take a sealant called Triple Thick. It is, I should put it on my desk. It's by Deco Art. It's called Triple Thick. It's a very thick, very glossy material. I'm not going to be able to get this open. There it is. It's a very thick, very glossy material that you can put over the top of this. You can see that shine on here. It looks very wet, like a sliced tomato would be. You want to make sure that you do at least 2 coats of the Triple Thick over your tomatoes. When you get some of the Triple Thick in there, you're going to take some, you can use real ones or fake ones, sesame seeds. I actually typically use real ones unless I'm doing black sesame, and then I use fake ones. These will not sprout once they're sealed. They're sealed forever. They do look like tomato seeds if you just take a tweezer, pick up the seeds, put them down in these little cavity areas. I use probably 8 of them on this one just to make it look realistic. You just want to put them in there. But real sesame seeds are totally fine as long as they're sealed in here. They're not going anywhere. They are there forever. So just using a tweezer and placing them in there and then resealing the top with the second coat of the triple thick is what you want to do. Then you will have the realistic tomato slices, and we can carry on making the hot brown. So one of the first components that you'll need to make a Kentucky hot brown is toast. They typically use Texas toast. These two pieces were made using a salt dough method. They are hard, unlike clay. They are ultra realistic. I use these for a lot of my breads. This was another bread that I did that I actually cut in half so that you could see the textural component. I did shade the outside of the bread. It was a round, it started out trying to be a sourdough, but it spread a little too much for sourdough, so I turned it into a different kind of bread. This is what salt dough can do for your realistic fake baking. Now this will be definitely another video, but I just wanted to show you how realistic the bread can be using different components. This is some salt dough wheat toast that I made. Again, it is very hard, very unbreakable. Well, I suppose it could be broken if you wanted to break it. I shaded this. It was a whole piece of bread. Before it was completely dry, I did cut it in half. You still get the realistic component of the cut piece of bread in there, unlike clay. When you cut the clay in half, it's very difficult to keep this bread-like texture, which is why I typically use salt dough for this kind of thing. Now the first thing that you're going to need for the Kentucky hot brown is a piece of toast. I'm not going to show you how to make the salt dough right now. I will tell you that you can make this out of clay. There are bread molds that you can get. They have a lot of texture in the middle of them. They come out looking like this before they are shaded. Now this was using the Model Magic. It does look like it has crust on it, but it does have a nice texture. It's a little small for this project, but if you used a couple of them, I think you'd be just fine if you don't want to do the salt dough. Like I said, the salt dough is going to be in another video, but this is what I'll be using to create our hot brown. And what I'll do, if you don't know the history of the hot brown, a hot brown was created in the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky in the 1920s. They used to have a dinner dance there, and up until the hot brown was invented, at around 2 a.m. when the guests were hungry and wanted food, they were served things like ham and eggs. The chef there decided that he wanted a little more upscale thing to serve the clientele, so he developed this open-faced turkey sandwich with a cheesy mornay sauce, 2 tomato slices, and 2 crisscrossed strips of bacon. That became the Kentucky hot brown. It's also one of the top foods ordered during the Kentucky Derby, which is what we're focusing on this week, is Derby food. So this is one of the main things served at the Derby. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 pieces of bread, we're going to put them on a plate, and we're going to layer some fake turkey on it. We're going to make a cheese sauce, put on some fake tomatoes, and some fake bacon strips. So, first thing we're going to do is make some fake turkey. What we're going to use for that is the Model Magic clay. This is my go-to because it has less shrinkage than foam clay. It's pretty easy to use, and you can mimic a lot of things with it. You need to make sure that you condition your clay completely, which is you want that taffy-like stretch when you start pulling on it. So, to make the turkey slices, which I made a couple already, made them look sort of like this, like you would slice it off, carve a piece of turkey with a little bit of the browned edge. So that's what we're going to be mimicking here. I figure about 2 slices These are fairly thick, and that's what's described in all of the hot brown recipes. You can find those in many cookbooks if you want to make this for real. It's been featured on lots of different TV shows, food shows. Even, I believe, Barbara Walters did a whole interview with some of the chefs from the Brown restaurant on the history and the making of the Kentucky Hot Brown. I'm sure you can find all of that online if you want to make this for real. It's a pretty yummy dish. What I'm doing is rolling this clay out because we're going to need 2 of these fake slices of turkey. So I took a little more than a golf ball size piece of clay and rolled it out to about 1/4 inch thick. No particular shape. I'm going to be using a square cookie cutter to cut this out with. This is the largest one that I have. This is about a 3 inch. I think it's just a little bit over 3 inches on the square side. It does have a little bit of the scalloped edge, but I'm not too concerned about that because I'm going to manipulate this quite a bit. I'm going to actually, this corner is going to be off the clay on this side when I cut it, and I'm just going to press down and cut that off and pull up my square. I'm going to start to pull in a couple of different directions because I want it to have sort of that kind of look, almost like the state of South Carolina look is what I'm thinking on how to shape your carved turkey. I may be completely incorrect. I don't want any pointy edges, so I want to push those down and round them out. I want my 2 slices to be fairly kind of look the same. And like I said, I'm not too worried about the scalloped edges. I will sort of smooth them as I go along. But there I have another sort of state of South Carolina piece of turkey. Then I'm going to take this, and I'm not even going to roll it out again. I'm just going to take these pieces and press them back on, and I'm going to curve this around and press it back down. I'm just going to roll it out just a little bit. Just enough for me to get my cookie cutter back on it. I'm going to take another slice out. Again, I want to reshape my edges, do a little pulling and reshaping, making it a little more rounded at the bottom, pulling out the sides just a little. Now they don't have to be exactly uniform because, you know, when you're cutting meat, no 2 slices are going to be the same. You just want them similar. And you want them to be fairly thick, about 1/4 inch. So there you have 2 fairly uniform slices, just like this one. Now to shade these, I actually did not shade the bottom of this one, and I'll tell you why. Because it's not going to show. It's a waste of time and it's a waste of product. I'm going to bring these toward me here. They almost look sort of like spread out bats. I'll put this little piece of clay away. Make sure you seal your clay back in an airtight area. Squeeze out the clay from the bag if you're keeping your extra in a Ziploc bag, and just make sure that you squeeze out that air and keep it in there nice and tight, and then it won't dry out. So to shade these, I use 2 colors. This is craft paint. I typically use a professional acrylic paint when I'm doing these, but I find these 2 pretty good for turkey colors. These are both made by Apple Barrel. This one is called Classic Caramel or Caramel, depending on how you pronounce that. And this is an antique white. You can find these at craft stores or online. going to use more antique white than I do the classic caramel. Probably twice as much of the one as to the other. I'm also going to put just a small drop of each right on my clay. And then I'm going to use my flat brush, clean some of the paint off of this. Make sure that your brush is damp but not overly wet. You just want it a little bit. I'm going to start smoothing this antique white across the top and a little bit around the edge. Like I said, I did not paint the bottom of these. It will not show. And I'm going to start to blend in, concentrating more on the sides with this classic caramel and on the top. Because the sides are, it's really the top of the turkey, so when you carve it, you're just going to see that ridge that was the baked part. You may have put just a little too much on there, so I'm going to wipe some off. And I'm going to blend this in with that antique white. Now you don't want to show too many lines, but this is going to be covered up with a sauce, so you're not going to see much anyway. If anything, you're going to see more of the sides. So I'm going to take some of this caramel color and just dip along the edges, just to give it that sort of golden brown baked turkey kind of look. So I'm going to do this pretty much the same thing with the other piece. I'm going to go around it with mostly the antique white. I'm going to blend in a little bit of that caramel color. I thought I was going to need more of the white, but I guess I'm not going to on these. I'm just going to dip that caramel color around the outside. And there we have 2 slices of turkey, all ready to go. Easy peasy, right? I'm going to save that and put it back in my jar. Thought I was going to need more, but I didn't. So here's how to assemble your hot brown. Now that we've got all of our ingredients made, except our mornay cheese sauce, which is fairly simple to make. That'll be the last thing that we do, and we'll pour it over the top and we'll make all of our assemblies. First thing you're going to need is some sort of plate or a bowl or a dish tray, anything that you want to assemble this on. You're going to want to put your toast piece on the bottom. Glue it down if you want to. I'm not going to. I don't think. Actually, maybe I will, just for a little added insurance. I typically use this Gorilla Glue clear glue to do most of my realistic fake bakes here. It has a very strong property of adherence, and I like it fairly well. It hasn't failed me yet. Knock on wood. I'm going to put just a little bit on my toast piece in the center of the plate. Now you can look up the instructions on how to make this, which is what I typically do when I'm making fake foods. I make sure that I get the real recipe first. If I can print pictures or at least look at pictures or know what the item looks like from something that I've made, it's extremely helpful for the different colors that you'll come across while you're making them. Now, the pieces of turkey that we just made here are not quite dry yet, so I'm going to save those, put those aside. I have some that I made earlier that are just about the same little darkened edges just like we did for these, about a 1/4 inch thick. I'm going to layer these. I'll probably do these, I'll glue each layer, I think, just for some added insurance. Especially if you're selling your products, you want to make sure that it's not going to come apart in shipping. So I'll put a little bit of this Gorilla Glue on top of my piece of toast. We'll just go ahead and glue each layer. So I want these pieces of turkey to show on the outsides. So you want to make sure that you look and find the best way to orient that so that your best outside layer is going to show. So they're layered about like that. And I'll put a little bit of glue in the middle of the turkey pieces here. Again, just for some little added insurance. Not too much, just a little. The clay is still a little bit pliable, and when it's completely hard, it will be a lot stiffer. So it'll probably stick to itself naturally. So that's what we have now, and you can see the toast underneath. I may go ahead and spread it out just a little bit more, just for the visual effect. And I'm not going to worry about the glue so much, because that's definitely not going to show. So I think I will spread this out just a little bit, just to fill the plate a little bit more. Now, the next thing that goes on here is a little bit of the cheese sauce. Then we'll add the tomatoes, a little more cheese sauce, and then we'll do the crisscross of the bacon strips. So to make my cheese sauce, I'll make sauces in a lot of different ways depending on what I'm doing. For this particular cheese sauce, it's a very thick cheese sauce. It is, if you've ever made a white sauce, you melt some butter in the pan, you put in some flour, and you make a thick paste, and you let it cook for just a few minutes. Then you add half and half or heavy cream plus a little milk, and you stir it around and you make a very thick cream sauce. For the mornay, what it is like a Parmesan cream sauce. Excuse me. So once you have your cream sauce developing, you'll add quite a bit of Parmesan cheese, or Romano. It is even a little bit stouter than Parmesan. Typically, this is a Romano-based. Mornay is more of a Romano based. So they'll start melting the shredded Romano into the cream sauce. Then when it's just about finished, they'll add a pinch of nutmeg and a little salt and pepper, and that's it. And you're good to go. It's a wonderful sauce to put over eggs or even just toast. I'm a cheese lover, so I'd put Mornay sauce on just about anything. But for this hot brown, it's ideal. So we have our toast, we have our turkey. This is a product that I make and sell in-house. You can find this in my Etsy shop under Two Perspective Studio. It's called icing glaze. They come in these 10-ounce containers. This is the white gloss that I'm going to be using here, and I'm going to change the color a little bit. I also sell this in a brown, which sort of mimics a chocolate icing. I use this for a lot of things. Icing drip is the most common thing that I use it for, but for a nice cheesy, thick Romano-based cream sauce like a Mornay, I think this will be ideal, and it'll hold its color and it'll hold its shape on the product. If you want more information about this icing glaze, you can check it out on Etsy at Two Perspective Studio, or you can message me here. I'm going to use, because Parmesan is a little bit off-white, I'm going to use the antique white, This is the Craft Paint by Apple Barrel. I'm not going to be using a ton, just a little bit, because I don't want it too dark. I'm also going to be adding some water to this because this mixture that I make is extremely thick. And if you want to use it as an icing drip or just a pourable glaze, you want to water it down with some water. Warm water works best. My water is about room temperature that I keep in my area. Room temperature water is just fine. I can't really give you exact measurements for this. It's just however runny you want it to be, which in the case of the Mornay sauce, we want it to still be fairly thick. We want it pourable, but we want it like a gravy consistency. So you just need to add water a little bit at a time. Make sure your paint color is staying correct. The water can dilute your paint color a little bit. It has to be mixed thoroughly. That's where the warm water really benefits you. You won't have any granulation if you use a warmer water when you're mixing it. So we're just about at a gravy consistency. Let me get a towel and clean that up. I use this lots for doing drip on the sides of cakes or mimicking royal icing on cookies. It's very good for all of that. So I have a thick gravy consistency here. May still be a little bit too thick. I'm going to let it stand for a minute and see if I need to add a little bit more water. I may just put just a pinch in here. Just to make sure that it's good and pourable. I don't want it to run all over the plate. I want it to stay mainly on top of the toast. There we go. That looks about perfect. I think that's pourable enough, but it's not going to go everywhere. Now it is just a slight off-white color, to where if you were making this cream sauce and you added a little bit of Romano cheese in it, it's just going to make it just slightly off-white. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that on top of my turkey. When this dries, it'll also act like a glue for the tomatoes that we're getting ready to put on here. I want just a little bit of this to drip over the edges, but not a ton. Just a little bit down on the plate, because we want it to be pretty. But we still want to be able to see the edges of the turkey and some of the toast underneath, because this really is a very attractive dish. So to this, we're going to add our tomatoes. Take the other one. I have two that I did earlier. Ours that we just made are not quite dry yet, so I'm going to use the ones that are dry. I'm going to make a nice little attractive 2 tomato piece there. We're going to add a little bit more of the mornay. I don't want to cover up the attractiveness of our tomatoes. We just want to add a little bit more sauce. probably pretty good. Ooh. It's sliding around the plate when I tilt that. So then we're going to take some of our bacon. I have a couple of pieces here. Now I think these bacon strips are a little bit too long. So I'm going to tear them just a little bit and make them shorter. So for the bacon, I trimmed down the ones that we made. Now, the typical hot brown has these crisscross bacon strips, kind of like this, in the cheese sauce. I think I will stick that one down a little bit like that. I think that looks a little bit better. I'm not sure. Maybe. I'm going to stick them both down. But you can still see the tomatoes, you can see the turkey, you can see the toast. So there is our hot brown creation. Not too difficult. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give that a difficulty level of about a 4, which isn't too bad. So this could definitely be a beginner sort of dish. The only other thing that I believe as a chef would do, I believe there's a pinch of paprika and a little bit of parsley sprinkled over the top of the dish. So, for the paprika, I typically use a little bit of cinnamon, which I don't seem to have on the desk right now, but I can use just a little bit of another product that I have, is some finishing sugar. Just a little pinch will give just a little bit of sparkle of paprika-like goodness on here. We don't want too much, just a little bit of accent here and there. And I think that will be just perfect. This, along with the icing glaze, can be found in my Etsy store again. So if you wanted to check any of those out, that will be just fine. If you have any questions about this Kentucky Hot Brown or any of the other items that I make or sell, you can leave it in the comments section. Until then, I hope you enjoy your Derby Day and consider making a Kentucky Hot Brown either for real or for fake. Until then, this is the Pop Chef. I'm Andy. Have a great day.